Alright, I'm going to go over a couple of projects here today dealing with objects. So, our first thing we're going to talk about, I told you we could create any numerous amount of things that we wanted, so I'm going to show you how I created a couple of things here. So the first thing I'm going to look at here is a TV. What describes what a TV is? Well, it has a channel, has a volume, whether it's on or off. Uh, the very basics of what this is. Of course, I can also deal with extra things. Does it have internet? Uh, is it connected? You could add in all kinds of little attributes if you want to. But I want to keep it basic, so I'm just going to say basic TV. So all I have to do is right-click, make a new Java class, and call it TV. And this is the code that's in there. So we've got the default channel, and you don't necessarily have to set a channel to default values here. You can just leave them blank if you want, but I set them to something, so in here I wouldn't have to. That's just another way you could do it. Now it's got a couple of methods. And the reason I did this also was it's a TV. Whenever you have it, it's kind of set to the default settings normally anyway, so that's my thinking there. I have a method called turn-on, which turns on the TV. On equals true. We had other code that displayed what the channel was and did all that stuff. That's what would check that. Turn off, of course, turns it off. On equals false. Set channel sets the channel. Now, your normal television, not counting super duper satellite or streaming, only has a certain range of channels. So, if it's within that range, and it's on, of course, so if we set the channel to another channel, we type it in, right? I want to go to channel 72. If it's on, and 72 is bigger than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to 120, then it will set the channel. Easy as that. Volume, same way. Now mine's set between 1 and 7. I mean, you could set it to whatever you want, really. This is just an example. But there you go. Basically, it's the same exact code, except of course, it needs to be on in order for me to turn on the volume. We have channel up, which does exactly what you think it would do. You press up and the channel goes up. Channel down, you press down and the channel goes down. So first thing it does is it checks to see if we are 120 or less. Or if we are, channel goes up. Now there's a slight little error here, I should say. If it's less than 120. Otherwise it'll go to 121. Although realistically in an actual TV, I would say, else if it's 120, set channel back to 1. Just kind of rotate around in a circle. That's how your most normal TVs work. But I'm just, again, keeping it simple. Channel down, same thing. If it's on and the channel is bigger than 1, we subtract by 1. We also have volume up, volume down, which is different than set volume, which sets it to a number. This just moves you up and down by 1. Now this is the entirety of the TV class. I have 3 attributes, and you can make them private or public. If you don't specify private, then they're going to be considered public, just like so. So here it is. That way. All right. Now the main, where we actually play with this a little bit, is here. I create 2 TVs, and I'll just comment out some of this that we're not using for the moment, and uncomment when we're ready. Now, I created 2 TVs. TV1, TV2. Each one's a new TV. It's created. The default channel would be 1. The default volume would be 1. And they'd all default to off. Now, if I run this, you're not going to see much because nothing's displaying. But let's unlock a few other things here. This is one of the reasons I left them public, so we could print the values. I could have just made a print method, but you kind of get the idea. So we see, all right, after this has all happened, TV1.on is true, it's on. The channel is at 2, the volume is at 2. So what happened? Let's see. Well, we turned on the TV1. We channeled up. It was 1, so it moved up to 2. And then we volume upped. And of course, we've got TV2 here as well. We turn it on. We set it to 56. And lo and behold, it's actually 56, so that's working. If I have a null TV, you'll get a crash because if a TV is null and does not have this equals new TV, it doesn't exist. You can't access a value on something that doesn't exist. So this is actually an error. Now I can create an array of TVs like this. So I can have a whole list of them if I wanted to. Now the problem with this is every one of these TVs is null. So if I were to come down here and attempt to, name 0, let's say, dot turn off, what I'm going to do is get a null pointer exception because that TV that's in that slot doesn't exist yet. Because for every TV I make, I have to have a constructor construct it. Then I can say, name 0 dot channel up or down. And then it's perfectly fine without crashing. All right, and that is the TV. Let's take a look at the other thing I made over here. Soup. I made a Wiener Dog. Just because, honestly. So make another project, or you could do it in the same project if you want, and you can call it Wiener Dog. It has a name, it has a length, and it has a sex. The answer to that is not yes, it's male or female. So, and just for giggles, I gave my weenie dog a sword. All good dogs need a sword, which I made over here. And the sword simply has damage, name. I have a constructor that assigns those values. And I have one method, that attack. And it just prints off this message. So, back to Wiener Dog. I have 3 attributes, name, length, sex, and, well, 4 if you count the sword. Wiener Dog, the constructor, assigns those values, as you can see. And I have a default constructor that just assigns set values. Notice I didn't give him a sword in the default. He only gets a sword up here in the specification here. There is bark. He looks at you and barks loudly. Eep, eep. He is a wiener dog. I mean, not exactly the most vicious dog on the planet. And then he has an attack, where he's had enough of your nonsense, and he suplexes you, or she suplexes you. I could have some misstatements in there that change the he to her, or whatever else, because I got this male-female item here, but yeah, doesn't need to be too fancy. So this is Wiener Dog, and I just decided what attributes I needed to describe a Wiener Dog. Class, bark, and attack. And in the main of Wiener Dog, we've got, let's see, I've created a sword called Duke Slayer. That has a grand total of, I believe that's 2 billion damage. I create a wiener dog called Fufu. And Fufu is 10 in length, is a male, and equips the Duke Slayer. Fufu barks, Fufu attacks. Now this line here, Fufu dot S dot attack. So the sword itself has an attack method on it. And it's on Fufu, so Fufu dot, and then I access his sword object, dot attack. And then we see the mighty Fufu doing its thing. Fufu looks at you and barks loudly, eep eep. Fufu has had enough of your nonsense. Fufu suplexes you. The sword swings infinite damages. I should probably change that to the sword Duke Slayer. But, you know, if I want to adjust that, I can come back to sword and instead of this, also print the name if you want to play with that. You know, instead of the sword swings, you could say whatever that name is, swings through the air. Now, the problem with this is here, the sword does not know what's holding it. The dog knows about the sword. The sword doesn't know who's holding it. Like most swords, they don't really know or care who's holding them at any given time. So, now if I wanted to change this here, I could, you know, get the name, because the wiener dog does know the sword. And I could do some of the stuff here if I need to. I could make a method that runs the sword attack from here and displays all the information. That's probably the better way to go. But there are several approaches you can do this. I could make a method called sword swing, and it just pulls the stats from the sword instead of having attack here. But you kind of get the idea. There are several approaches to everything you can possibly think of. But there is sword, and there is wiener dog. So as you can see, I made several different objects here, all of which were completely different. They all have different things. Mostly it's just print statements, but if I wanted them to interact, you know, I could pass values between different objects. You just have to add a little bit of extra coding in there for that. Now the last item here is a person. I just decided, why not make a person? We've made a dog. We've made, you know, a sword. We made a couple of little items here. We even made a TV. Why not a person? So, attributes for my person, very simple. Hair color. And I could make this a color instead of just a string if I wanted to. If I were actually visually displaying stuff. We've dealt with colors in Java before. I have an age and a name. Pretty simple. We create a person. Default constructor doesn't set anything at all for this one. We have set name, set age, set hair. Honestly, it's much better to assign values when you create the person than to just create a blank slate. The only time you'd probably want to create a blank slate, let's think of character creator in any game. What's the first thing you see? A blank slate. You adjust the eyes, the nose. Although it's not completely blank, it's usually set to defaults. No clothes, no equipment, no age, and then you set all that stuff as you create, depending on how involved the character creators are. Now, scroll on down. I have a set name, set age, and set hair color since they're all private. And this will set the values for that person. And then I can print each of those. It's pretty simple. Just throw it together real fast. Person, those three attributes. A basic constructor, although you can make another constructor. Maybe a nice little side thing for you to try is to make a constructor that takes those three values and assigns them. At this point, you should be able to do that. Just add that in. And then, of course, in the main, I just create two people. We've got person A, person B. Person A is Seamus, 20 years old, red hair color. And then we have Bertha, 224 years old and blue hair color. Of course, blue-haired old ladies. So we take a little quick run, and I should see the stats for both of those. Seamus, Bertha. If I were to make a person C and just do this, equals new person, what would happen if I printed C? C.print. What do you think? Well, since these values are not set to anything, I'm going to get nulls. Name isn't set to anything. Now, this is different than the null pointer exception that we've had before. And that's because the person was created. It's just the values inside the person weren't. Strings default to null. Integers default to 0. Double defaults to 0.0. So they are defaulted to values. Now, if I didn't have this, though, like that, then, yes, I would get a null pointer exception. Or actually, it wouldn't even be to compile because it's going to give me this error about it being initialized. But you kind of see the picture there. So if you want to play with any of these, again, I would encourage you to adjust a little bit. Make a constructor for this one. Add some stuff to the Wiener Dog. Go into the TV and add some other things if you want. Like the wrapping around of the channel, that's not that hard to do. If I hit channel up, if it happens to be at 120 when I hit channel up, set it to channel 1. Maybe put some print statements in there so you can see what's happening. I left a little bit off here, a little bit purposely so everyone can add and adjust and do a little bit more. Um, Most of this code is just about practicing and playing with it. Add in a little bit more stuff. See if you can add this. See if you can add that. The more you do that, the more you learn. The easier it is to do the projects and tests and understand what's going on. All right, that is your quick tutorial over objects. Hope everybody enjoyed that. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask about anything you want or refer back to the other videos. I'll be happy to answer any issues you have.